It's about 44 minutes to go before Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivers the medium-term budget policy statement. My colleague Nastassia Arendse is on the ground in the Parliamentary Precinct this afternoon. Let's hear from her about what to expect this afternoon. A very good afternoon to you, Nastassia. What can we expect when the Finance Minister takes to the podium?
Good afternoon, Zinga. Well, there's actually a lot to unpack. The idea of this balancing act between the sluggish economic growth that we find ourselves in, as well from the expenditure side. So it's going to be quite interesting in terms of what he mentioned in that budget policy statement. One of the key things that investors are going to be looking out for is whether he is going to continue with the same stance as his predecessor, whether he is going to continue to defend Treasury stance when it comes to the expenditure side of things. But to talk to us exactly about some of those things, we are joined by Professor Tickle, who is from SABC. Professor, thank you so much for your time. So we set the scene about an hour ago in terms of looking at it from an economic point of view. But the one thing that I can imagine the rating agencies and the investors are going to be looking out for is whether he'll be able to balance the side of the transformation, given his background as the head of transformation of the ANC prior to this position, and whether he'll be able to still hold the same line as his predecessor in terms of, from a spending point of view. Are those some of the things you're going to be looking out for the moment he starts his first word?
Yes, of course. I think it's important to understand that there are a number of areas where the people will be looking to the minister for example, the basic income grant. Yeah. And it is a very honourable thing to be looking at. But we need to be very, very careful that we don't spend in the short term and damage the long term. If we do spend on the basic income grant, we need to have done all the work, all the analysis to make sure that we are not damaging other areas of the economy as a consequence. Yeah. We already have 18 million people on government grants, and if this basic income grant does become a permanent item, it will cost a lot more money. And obviously there's, as we said, a balancing act. Yeah. There's a certain amount of income. We have to fund the balance with debt. There is infrastructure that we need to be spending on in order to assure ourselves a future for those very people who are looking to the government at the moment for that basic income grant. Yeah. Very difficult, very difficult, yes.
So a little bit earlier on, we had the National Advocacy Manager for Black Sash, and they're calling for the extension of that social relief of distress grant, that 350 Rand. The question, I suppose, then becomes is how long do you extend it for, and to what extent can we then compare it to the whole pathway to that basic income grant? Because I suppose you can't extend it for too long given where we are from an expenditure point of view, and that it doesn't really match up with our GDP growth.
Yes. So, as I said, the basic income grant is it's a vexed question, because obviously there are people who are clamouring and need to be supported on the one hand, and then there's a country to be supported on the other. And I used the phrase earlier, spend to the end. Yeah. I mean, if people just think of a basic household, you've got so much money coming in and you spend it on what you spend it. If you spend it all today, then you won't have anything left for the future. And this is what the analyses need to investigate. How much can we afford to support those people now, to the detriment or to the benefit of the future? There are those who say that it might be beneficial to spend on the basic income grant because those people will go out and spend. Yeah. But what we have to remember is somebody has to pay for all of this, and our tax base is very small. As I said, there's 18 million people on the normal ZASA grant. There are only 6 million individuals who are registered for income tax. Now, we have to remember that everybody in the country pays or pays some tax, whether it's VAT, whether it's fuel levy, whether it's paying excise duties on alcohol. We all pay something. Even if you don't earn anything, you pay something if you go out and buy something in a shop. But the main source of income in this country is the individuals and the corporates. And the individuals are currently under pressure from SARS. They're being investigated, quite rightly. Those who don't pay must pay their share. But once SARS has exhausted that road, where are they going to go next? There's only so many people. We need to be attracting in wealthy people, wealthy investors. We need more business. We need jobs. We need people to have the pride that a job gives them. We need to be building this country, and that's really the question. Does the analysis of the basic income grant, where people are supported and not working, does that detriment or help the future? And we need to be very careful not to just jump in and say, let's just do this. We need to have done it properly.
All right, Prof, we'll definitely catch up with you. Lots to think about there from Professor Tickle when it comes to that universal basic income grant. Certainly, as we get closer to that 2 p.m. Time slot, we will hear from the Finance Minister, and we'll catch up with her because she did talk about infrastructure, and I do want to understand from her perspective how she sees private sector playing a more active role in terms of getting that infrastructure up and running. What kind of environment would be conducive for the private sector to be able to participate meaningfully? However, I'm not alone here at the precinct. My colleague Bulelani Philip is standing by. Bulelani, over to you.
Thanks, Nastassia. Of course, there is also a lot of political expectation here in the precinct of Parliament. I'm going to jump straight into it and invite the President of the PAC, Mr. Mzwanele Nyonso. Thank you, sir, so much for your time. As the PAC, what would you expect the Finance Minister to pronounce on this coming afternoon?
No, we expect the Finance Minister to tell us how is he going to save the economy. Remember, the economy is in tatters. Remember, South Africa has just overtaken Brazil as the most unequal society in the world. Now, we expect him to tell us, well, how is he going to save the economy? How is he going to save the country? We also expect him to say something to what his predecessor, Tito Mboweni, has said here in Parliament, that the pension funds can be accessed. They are keeping quiet. Government employees expect answers. What is going to happen? He must tell us what is going to happen. So we expect him to tell us how is he going to change the economy. Unemployment, I mean, youth unemployment is in this country is just above the level. So that's what we expect from him.
The other breaking story at this hour is the passing away of the former president, F.W. de Klerk. As the PAC, your message?
Now we don't care about de Klerk. Our heart goes with the families, the victims of de Klerk. We are just worried that de Klerk dies without telling us who pulled the trigger in Umtata, Pendulo children. We are just worried about them. We don't care about de Klerk. We just wish and hope that his remains will be thrown in the sea, and of course not in the African seas. We don't care about de Klerk, the architecture of the so-called new constitution that keeps Africans landless in their country, that keeps Ablakada still behind the jail even today. We don't care about de Klerk. He can die, but we are worried about families because they do not have closure.
Should he get a state funeral?
If things were going PAC way, there's no need for de Klerk to get a state funeral. For what? For killing Africans? For oppressing us? For what? No, there's no need for that.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Mzwanele Nyonso, the PAC president, expressing his views on the passing away of former President F.W. de Klerk. I'm going to invite also in the conversation the UDM leader, General Bando Holomisa. We're still just having a conversation. General, please, we are live on SABC 404. Just firstly, we did speak about the budget earlier on, but in this hour, the breaking news of the passing away of Mr. de Klerk, the UDM's position.
The United Democratic Movement passes its own condolences to the de Klerk family and his former colleagues. The President de Klerk, we have had a rocky relationship relations with him when I was in charge of Transkei. So he punished us financially, and also he authorized raids in Transkei. A number of those people were intercepted. Many of them were Askaris, but be that as it may, he will be remembered as having played a role in facilitating for New South Africa. That we cannot deny. He did far better than his predecessor, that is P.W. Botha. So we think that the ground he laid with Mandela's, with the rest of the political parties in this country have led to us to where we are now. But you cannot blame Mandela and de Klerk today. The onus is on us as people who were given baton to deliver services to our people, not to steal government monies.
Lastly, before I let you go, with regards to the Cresta incident, I'm sure you might recall it. Do you forgive that kind of a person?
Not Crest. No, I retaliated immediately, if you still remember. When that happened, the following day we chased away the ambassador of South Africa. And with such a thing, it needs the family, the two families, I mean the family of who was affected, and also his party. But from my personal point of view, I think de Klerk did the wrong thing. Whilst we are busy in the negotiations as a country, then he appeared as if he was negotiating in bad faith. So that one we cannot accept it.
Okay, thank you so much, General Bantu Olomisa, the leader of the UDM, of course, giving us his reaction to the passing away of Mr. F.W. de Klerk. On that note, we'll cross back to you in studio.